The husband's secret ritual. The night was silent, save for the soft rustling of the wind against the thatched roof of the small hut. The village of Koroma lay still, blanketed by the calm of midnight, but within the walls of Osaze's home, his heart was anything but calm. He lay beside his wife, Nia, listening to her steady breathing as she slept. She was beautiful, more beautiful than any woman he had ever known, and yet her beauty was matched only by her pride. Nia loved fine things. She wanted gold bangles, silk dresses, and a life filled with luxury, and she had made it clear that she expected him to provide it all. But how? Osaze was a simple farmer, breaking his back under the sun each day, yet no matter how hard he worked, it was never enough. Nia's hunger for wealth was insatiable, and her sharp tongue never let him forget it. "You're a man, Osaze," she had scoffed just that morning. A real man would find a way to make sure his wife is respected. A real man would not let his woman be laughed at. Her words had cut deep, as they always did. The village women whispered about Nia's arrogance, about her tendency to boast of riches she did not have, and Osaze had to endure the pitying looks of the other men, who knew his struggle. And so, tonight, he was doing something he never imagined he would. Osaze rose from the bed as slowly as he could, careful not to wake Nia. His hands trembled as he reached for her scarf, the red silk cloth she often tied around her waist, a piece of her that carried her scent. The oracle had said that was enough. It had been only 3 days since Osaze had visited the old oracle who lived at the edge of the forest. The man was ancient, his face lined like cracked earth, his voice as deep as the river. When Osaze had knelt before him and begged for a way to change his fortunes, the oracle had studied him in silence before speaking. "Wealth comes at a price," the oracle had said. "And the spirits do not give without taking. But if you are willing, they will open the path for you." Osaze had hesitated, but then Nia's words echoed in his mind. A real man would find a way. "What must I do?" Osaze had asked. The oracle had leaned forward, eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Take something that belongs to your wife. Something close to her. Something she wears." "A cloth?" Osaze asked, confused. The oracle nodded. "The spirits will use it to bind your fate to theirs. Offer it at the tree where the river bends, and wealth will come to you. But once the spirits have tasted your life, they will always return for more." Osaze swallowed hard. It had sounded simple at the time, but now, as he stood beside Nia's sleeping form, he felt the weight of what he was about to do. With one final glance at his wife's peaceful face, Osaze lifted the scarf from her waist and stepped into the night. The village was quiet, save for the occasional hoot of an owl in the distance. Osaze made his way through the darkness, past the huts of sleeping families, until he reached the river bend where the great tree stood. It was a sacred place, avoided by most villagers after dark. The elders spoke of spirits that lived within the roots, waiting to grant favors to those who dared to ask, but always at a cost. Osaze's hands were cold as he placed the scarf at the base of the tree. "I offer this," he whispered, his voice barely carrying in the night air. "For wealth. For my family. For Nia." The wind shifted. A deep, unnatural silence fell over the forest, and then, just as suddenly, the night sounds returned. Osaze stood frozen for a long moment before turning away, his heart hammering. It was done. He had taken the first step. He just didn't know what it would cost him yet. The next morning, the first sign of change appeared. As Osaze sat outside his hut, still shaking from the night before, a man from the neighboring village approached. "You are Osaze?" the man asked. Osaze nodded cautiously. The man smiled. "I have heard you are a hard worker. I need strong hands to help with my harvest, and I am willing to pay well." It was unusual, no one had ever sought him out for work before. But he accepted, and by the end of the day, he returned home with more money than he had ever made in a single afternoon. When he placed the coins in Nia's hands, her eyes widened in disbelief. "Where did you get this?" she demanded. Osaze hesitated before lying. "A lucky day." Nia's lips curled into a satisfied smile. "Good. Keep having lucky days, husband. I have things I want to buy." And so, the first reward had come. But Osaze knew the spirits would return. And they would want more. The demands of the oracle. The village of Koroma was alive with morning chatter as the sun stretched across the sky, but Osaze barely heard it. His hands trembled as he counted the coins he had earned. It was more money than he had ever seen at once. His thoughts drifted back to the scarf he had left beneath the great tree, and a cold feeling spread through his chest. Was this truly luck? Or had the spirits accepted his offering? Inside the hut, Nia admired herself in a polished bronze mirror, tilting her head as she wrapped a bright new cloth around her waist. The moment Osaze had handed her the money, she had rushed to the marketplace, spending without hesitation. New bangles jingled on her wrists, and her earrings sparkled in the morning sun. "Osaze, look how beautiful I am," she said, twirling. He forced a smile. "You are always beautiful, Nia." She smirked. "Yes, but now the whole village will see it." Osaze sighed. He had thought this money would ease her hunger for wealth, but it only fed the fire. That night, as they lay in bed, Osaze's mind was restless. Was this truly the end of it? He had given the spirits what they wanted, hadn't he? But deep down, he knew it wasn't over. And then, as if summoned by his thoughts, a whisper called his name. "Osaze." His body froze. The whisper came from outside the hut. Low, dry, like the rustling of dead leaves. He turned his head. Nia was fast asleep, her breathing soft and steady. She hadn't heard it. But Osaze had. Slowly, he got up, his heart pounding against his ribs. He stepped outside, the cool night air brushing against his skin. And then he saw him. The oracle. The old man stood at the edge of the village, his long, tattered robe swaying in the wind. His eyes, black as the night, held no reflection. He did not blink. Osaze swallowed hard. He had hoped he would never see him again. "You came," Osaze whispered. The oracle tilted his head. "Did you think the spirits would give without expecting more?" A chill crawled up Osaze's spine. "I gave you my wife's cloth. The wealth came. What more do you want?" The oracle smiled, his teeth yellowed and jagged. "The spirits are pleased with your offering," he said, "but cloth is only the beginning. They hunger for more." Osaze felt his stomach drop. What do they want?" The oracle lifted a bony finger, pointing at him. "Blood." Osaze's breath caught in his throat. "A sacrifice must be made," the oracle continued. "To keep the riches flowing, you must spill the blood of a ram under the great tree." Osaze clenched his fist. He was not a killer. Even the thought of it made his skin crawl. But then he thought of Nia. Her pride, her insatiable hunger for wealth. What would she do if the money disappeared as suddenly as it had come? She would hate him. She would curse him. And so, with heavy steps, he nodded. "I will do it." The oracle's smile widened. "Then you will have everything you desire, and more." The blood offering. The next evening, Osaze did as he was told. He stole away into the fields, finding the strongest ram he could. The animal struggled, sensing something was wrong, but Osaze held firm. When he reached the sacred tree, the wind had fallen silent. Even the insects did not make a sound. It was as if the world itself was holding its breath. Osaze hesitated, his knife trembling in his grip. Was he truly willing to do this? But then, in his mind, he saw Nia laughing with her new jewelry, parading through the village while others whispered enviously behind her back. He couldn't take that away from her. And so, with one swift motion, he did it. The blood soaked the earth. And then, the ground shifted beneath his feet. Osaze staggered back, his breathing ragged. A deep, guttural growl rumbled from the earth, like something awakening beneath the tree. Then, silence. The air around him grew warmer, heavier, as if unseen eyes were watching. And then, just as quickly as it had come, the feeling was gone. It was done. Osaze wiped the sweat from his brow, his hands still shaking. He stumbled back toward the village, his mind racing. Would it work? Would the riches truly come? He wouldn't have to wait long for his answer. Riches beyond imagination. The following days were like a dream. First, a merchant from a distant town stopped Osaze in the village square. You work in the fields, yes. I need someone trustworthy to transport my goods. I will pay well. The merchant offered 3 times the normal wage. Then, another surprise, an old debt, long forgotten, was suddenly repaid. And then, gold coins appeared beneath Osaze's sleeping mat one morning, as if the spirits themselves had placed them there. The wealth flowed like a river, and for the first time, Osaze no longer worried about feeding his family. Nia was beside herself with joy. This is it, Osaze. This is the life we were meant to have, she laughed, throwing handfuls of coins into the air like rain. She paraded through the village in her finest clothes, draped in gold and silks, her head held high as if she were a queen. She no longer spoke with common women. She scoffed at old friends, turning her nose up at those who had once whispered behind her back. Osaze watched her from a distance, his heart heavy. Something was wrong. The riches had come. But at what cost? The warning. That night, Osaze could barely sleep. The air felt thick, as if something unseen was pressing against his chest. And then, the whispers came. Osaze. He shot up in bed, sweat dripping down his face. The shadows moved at the corner of the room. And there, standing in the doorway, was the oracle. You have done well, Osaze, the old man whispered. But the spirits grow hungry again. Osaze felt his stomach twist. No, he said. I gave you the ram. I gave you its blood. That should be enough. The oracle chuckled. Enough, he whispered. Did I not tell you, Osaze? The spirits do not give without taking. And now, the next sacrifice must be made. Osaze felt his chest tighten. What do they want now? The oracle's lips curled into a smile. Not an animal this time. Osaze's blood ran cold. The oracle took a step forward. Now, they want human blood. The ultimate temptation. Osaze's blood ran cold. The oracle's words echoed in his ears. Now, they want human blood. He staggered back, his breathing ragged. No, he whispered, shaking his head. That was not the deal. The oracle only smiled, his dark eyes gleaming in the dim light of the hut. The deal has always been the same, Osaze. The spirits give, and the spirits take. If you refuse, your wealth will turn to dust, and madness will consume you. Osaze's pulse pounded. He had known, deep down, that this day would come. The oracle had warned him, once the spirits have tasted your life, they will always return for more. But human blood. His hands trembled as he clutched the sleeping mat beneath him. He had taken from animals before, but this was a line he could not cross. I won't do it, he whispered. The oracle let out a low, dry chuckle. Then prepared to lose everything. And then, he vanished. Osaze's breath came in short gasps as the weight of the oracle's words settled in his chest. Was this how it ended? Would all his sacrifices be for nothing? Would Nia turn against him when the riches disappeared? The thought clawed at his mind, and for the first time, fear of losing her gripped him harder than fear of the spirits. But whose blood would they take? Nia's unquenchable greed. The next morning, Osaze awoke to laughter, Nia's laughter. She twirled before the mirror, admiring her reflection in a new golden necklace, her wrist jingling with bangles that gleamed in the sunlight. "Osaze," she said, turning to him, her face alight with pride. "The villagers are watching us. Do you see how they look at me now?" Osaze forced a weak smile. "They do." Nia grinned. "Of course they do. No woman in Koroma is as well dressed as I am. Not even the chief's wife." She laughed, tossing her hair over her shoulder. But Osaze wasn't listening. All he could think about was the price of this wealth. "Nia," he said slowly, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Have you ever wondered why our fortune changed so suddenly?" She raised an eyebrow. "What are you talking about?" "This money, this gold," he gestured to the chest overflowing with coins, the silks and fine garments that filled their once empty hut. "Don't you find it strange?" Nia frowned, brushing off his concern. "Osaze, why must you always overthink? Wealth is wealth. It doesn't matter where it comes from. What matters is that we have it." Osaze stared at her, his stomach twisting. She didn't care. She didn't care about where the riches came from, what it cost, or what price still needed to be paid. And then she said something that chilled him to the bone. "We need even more." Osaze's breath caught. "What?" Nia rolled her eyes. "Osaze, think bigger. Look at the village chief, he has a house with 4 rooms, not 1. He has servants. We should have servants. We should have a house that people bow to when they pass. We should have more gold than we can carry." Osaze felt sick. She would never be satisfied. No amount of wealth would ever be enough. And if she found out the truth about the sacrifices, would she still stand by his side? Or would she be the one to offer the next victim? The darkest decision. That night, Osaze could not sleep. The oracle's words haunted him. Human blood. He had no enemies, no one to turn his blade upon. The very idea of harming another person sickened him. But then, a thought entered his mind. Nia. Could she be the one? He immediately shook the thought away, disgusted with himself. No. No matter how greedy she was, no matter how blind she had become to the cost of their wealth, he would never do such a thing. But then, what other choice did he have? The spirits were coming for a soul. If he did nothing, would they take his own? Would they take hers anyway? A slow, cold realization settled over him. He needed a way out. A way to break free. And then, he remembered the oracle's words. Take something that belongs to her. Something close to her. Osaze's breath quickened. The last time, he had taken her scarf. But this time, if he wanted to shift the burden to her, he needed something even more personal. Something that would bind her to the spirits, just as he had been bound. Her undergarments. The theft of fate. As the moon rose high in the sky, Osaze moved carefully. Nia slept soundly, her body draped in the finest cloth money could buy. He knelt beside her, his heart hammering. Could he really do this? Was this betrayal? Or was this justice? Slowly, carefully, he reached out. His fingers brushed against the soft fabric of her undergarments. She stirred in her sleep, and for a moment, Osaze froze, his breath trapped in his throat. But then she sighed and rolled over, lost in dreams. And so, with steady hands, he slipped the garment free and tucked it beneath his cloak. The deed was done. Now, All that was left was the offering. The final sacrifice. At midnight, Osaze stood beneath the great tree once more. The night was deathly still. He knelt, placing Nia's stolen garment at the base of the roots. His voice was quiet, but firm. "I offer this," he whispered. "Take from her as you have taken from me." The wind shifted violently, howling through the trees, shaking the branches. The earth trembled beneath his feet. And then, silence. The air grew thick, heavy, as if something unseen had passed through the world. And then, just like before, it was done. Osaze stood slowly, his chest rising and falling with deep breaths. He had done what he had to. Now, all that was left was to see what the spirits would take, the price of greed. The following morning, Nia collapsed. One moment, she was standing before the mirror, admiring herself. The next, her legs gave out beneath her. She let out a sharp cry, clutching at the wall as she sank to the ground. Osaze rushed to her side, his heart hammering. "Nia. What's wrong?" I can't feel my legs," she gasped, her eyes wide with terror. And then, her hands began trembling. A cold sweat broke out on her forehead as her body grew weaker and weaker. Something was taking her strength. The spirits had accepted the offering. And now, they were taking their due. Osaze watched in silence as realization dawned upon him. The price had been paid. But this was only the beginning. The price of wealth. Nia lay on the floor, her breath coming in short gasps. Her legs would not move. Her arms trembled as she tried to push herself up, but there was no strength left in them. Panic filled her eyes. "Osaze," she cried. "Something is wrong. I can't stand." Osaze knelt beside her, forcing himself to feign concern. He placed his hands on her shoulders, his heart pounding. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "I feel weak," she gasped. Like my body is fading." Osaze knew exactly what was happening. The spirits had taken their due. And Nia was paying the price. A gathering of whispering voices. Word spread through the village like wildfire. The once proud Nia, the woman who had strutted through the streets dripping in gold, the woman who had boasted about her riches, was now helpless, confined to her sleeping mat. Whispers grew among the villagers. "Did you hear? Nia can no longer walk. Some say it's a curse. Perhaps the gods are punishing her pride." Some pitied her. Others laughed in secret, remembering all the times she had mocked them for being poor. Osaze remained silent. He watched as Nia struggled, as she begged healers for remedies, as she pleaded with the gods for mercy. And yet, no matter what she tried, her strength continued to fade. It was only the beginning. The visit to the herbalist. Desperate, Nia's mother arrived in the village. The moment she saw her daughter's frail form, her eyes filled with horror and rage. "What has happened to my child?" she demanded. Osaze lowered his gaze, pretending to be a grieving husband. She grew sick overnight," he said quietly. "We have tried everything." Nia's mother did not believe him. She took Nia to a powerful herbalist, a woman known for her wisdom, for her ability to see into the unseen. The herbalist studied Nia in silence. Then, she spoke. "You are cursed," she said simply. Nia let out a small, horrified gasp. Her mother clutched her chest. "Cursed? By who? Why?" The herbalist's eyes turned to Nia. "That depends. What sins have you hidden?" Silence filled the air. Nia's face paled. And then, as the herbalist handed her a black potion, the confession began. A black potion, the confession began. A confession of greed. As the potion burned down her throat, Nia's words tumbled from her lips like water from a broken pot. She confessed it all. She spoke of her envy for her sister's wealth, of the money she had borrowed and never returned, of her endless lies to the villagers. Then, her voice lowered into a trembling whisper. I forced Osaze to seek wealth, even when he didn't want to. Osaze stiffened. Nia didn't stop. We went to the oracle, she choked, her mother's face turning pale with shock. We sacrificed our unborn child. Her mother let out a cry of horror. I watched as Osaze lost his eye and his toes, just to keep the money flowing. Her mother fell to her knees, tears spilling down her face. But the herbalist's gaze remained sharp. There is more, she said. And then, Nia spoke the words that made Osaze's blood turn to ice. The ultimate betrayal. I wished for Osaze to die. The room fell into stunned silence. Osaze felt his chest tighten. He had suspected it, but to hear it from her own lips. I wanted him dead, Nia whispered. So I could take all the riches and leave this village. So I could live a life of luxury, without him slowing me down. Her mother sobbed. The herbalist narrowed her eyes. And yet, here you are, broken instead. Osaze gritted his teeth. He had given everything for Nia. And she had been waiting for him to die. Rage burned in his chest. But then, the herbalist spoke words that changed everything. Your husband sacrificed your panties. The spirits did not punish you for your greed alone, the herbalist said. They punish you because your husband made the final offering. Nia's head snapped up. What? The herbalist turned to Osaze. You took something of hers. Something close to her. Osaze felt his stomach twist. The spirits accepted your wife's undergarment, the herbalist continued. And so, instead of taking from you, they turned on her. Nia's face drained of color. She stared at Osaze. You did this to me, she whispered. Osaze did not answer. He didn't have to. She already knew the truth. The fall of the queen. Nia was dragged back to the village, her once golden reputation now shattered. The people whispered as she was carried through the streets, a broken shell of the woman who had once mocked them. This is the price of greed. This is the punishment for arrogance. Nia tried to speak, to curse Osaze, to scream at the villagers, but her body was too weak. She could only watch as the wealth she had once worshipped was taken away. Her mother wept beside her, shaking her head in shame. And Osaze. He watched it all. For the first time in years, he felt at peace. The spirits had taken what was owed. But the story was not over yet. The vanishing of Osaze. That night, Osaze disappeared. When Nia finally arrived home, she found the hut empty. The gold was gone. The jewels had vanished. Every piece of wealth they had gained was missing. And Osaze was nowhere to be found. She collapsed onto the floor, rage and despair twisting inside her. She had thought she could control everything. She had thought Osaze was weak. But in the end, he had outplayed her. And now, he was free. The lesson of Nia. The villagers spoke of Osaze and Nia for years to come. Some said Osaze ran away with the wealth, living out his days in a distant land, free from the curse of the spirits. Others whispered that he had made one final sacrifice, that he had vanished into the night, taking his story with him. But one thing remained certain. Nia never recovered. Her strength never returned. She was left with nothing but regret, nothing but the bitter taste of betrayal and broken dreams. And as she faded into obscurity, the village of Koroma learned a powerful lesson. The spirits always take their due. And greed always has a price. The vanishing of Osaze. The village of Koroma remained haunted by whispers of what had transpired between Osaze and Nia. Some feared the spirits, wondering if they, too, could be cursed if they let greed consume them. Others mocked Nia, calling her the queen who fell, a woman who once held her head high but now crawled through the dust. But the one question that lingered above all others was this. Where was Osaze? The night he left. After Nia's collapse, after her curse took hold, Osaze watched in silence. He had not spoken a word. He had not celebrated. He had simply waited. And when the night came, he made his move. Nia had clung to her bed, too weak to rise. She did not even see him go. The gold, the jewels, the treasures, he took them all. And then, with one final glance at the home he had built, the home he had sacrificed everything for, Osaze walked away. He left Koroma without a word. Without a farewell. And as the morning sun rose, he was gone. The search for the cursed man. Days passed. Then weeks. And yet, Osaze did not return. The villagers searched far and wide, but there was no trace of him. Nia, desperate, enraged, humiliated, demanded answers. He took everything from me, she cried. Where is he? Where has that cursed man gone? But no one had an answer. Some said he had fled to a far-off land, rich beyond measure. Others believed he had vanished into the shadows, swallowed by the spirits he had once served. But only one person knew the truth. The Oracle. A final visit to the Oracle. One stormy night, Nia, despite her frail state, dragged herself to the edge of the forest. Rain poured in heavy sheets, soaking her to the bone. Yet, she did not stop. She had to know. She had to find him. She arrived at the oracle's hut, her breath shallow, her body weak. The old man sat before a smoky fire, his dark eyes gleaming as he saw her approach. I was expecting you, he said. Nia's voice was hoarse as she spoke. Where is he? She demanded. Where is Osaze? The oracle did not answer immediately. He simply stared into the fire, as if watching something unfold within its depths. And then, he spoke words that sent a chill down Nia's spine. He paid the final price. Nia's breath caught. What do you mean? The oracle slowly lifted his gaze to her. The spirits do not let go so easily, he murmured. They gave wealth in exchange for sacrifice. And when you refused to give, Osaze took the burden himself. Nia shook her head violently. He ran away. He took the gold. He betrayed me. The oracle smiled, a slow, knowing smile. He did not run away, Nia. Nia's heart pounded. The room felt colder. The shadows seemed to close in around her. Then, the oracle leaned forward and whispered. Osaze gave his all. Nia froze. What? She whispered. The oracle gestured to the fire, and as Nia gazed into its flickering flames, she saw it. A vision. Of Osaze. Not in a faraway land. Not surrounded by riches. But standing alone, in the darkness of the sacred forest. His eyes vacant. His body still. As if he were a man who had left everything behind, including his own will to live. And in the distance, something loomed. A presence too terrible to name. A shadow with no face, yet endless hunger. The spirits had come for their final offering. And Osaze had given himself. The fate of the greedy and the broken. Nia stumbled back, her breath ragged. No, he wouldn't, she gasped. He wouldn't. But the truth stood before her. Osaze had not run away. He had not stolen their riches. He had given himself to the spirits, to escape her. To end the cycle. To make sure neither of them could ever use that cursed word again. And now, he was lost to the spirits forever. Nia let out a scream of rage and despair. Her hands clawed at the ground, her mind spiraling into darkness. She had thought herself invincible. She had thought she could control everything. And yet, in the end, she had lost everything. Her riches, her power, her husband, her very soul. The legend of Osaze and Nia. No one ever saw Osaze again. Some say his spirit still roams the sacred forest, a warning to those who seek wealth without understanding its cost. Others say he became part of the spirits themselves, forever bound to the shadows he once bargained with. As for Nia, she lived the rest of her days in shame. No longer the queen of the village. No longer draped in gold. Just a broken woman, weighed down by the ghost of her own greed. She never laughed again. She never boasted again. And when she finally faded into the dust, the villagers whispered only one lesson in remembrance of her tale. The spirits always take their due. And greed always has a price. The shadow of Osaze. The story of Osaze and Nia spread far beyond the village of Koroma. People whispered it by firelight, warning their children, their friends, their neighbors. Beware of greed. Beware of the spirits. Beware of the cost of taking what is not freely given. Yet, despite the tale being told and retold, one question remained. Was Osaze truly gone? Or did his spirit still walk among the living? The wanderer in the forest. Many years passed. The memory of Nia's downfall became a lesson, one told in hushed voices and fearful glances toward the dark edge of the forest. No one dared venture near the sacred tree where the spirits dwelled. But one night, a group of young hunters, bold and reckless, dared to test the warnings. Armed with bows and spears, they entered the woods, laughing at the foolish fears of the old. But their laughter died when they reached the river bend. Because there, standing beneath the great tree, was a man. Silent. Still. Waiting. His skin was pale as moonlight, his clothes tattered, his face half hidden in shadow. But his remaining eye glowed dimly in the darkness. And when he turned to face them, they ran. The fear of the villagers. The young hunters returned home breathless, their faces pale with terror. They told the village elders of the man in the forest, the man who did not speak, who did not move, but who watched them with eyes that had seen too much. The cursed one, the elders murmured. The man who gave himself to the spirits. Some claimed it was Osaze's ghost, trapped between worlds, bound to the land where he had made his final sacrifice. Others whispered that it was not Osaze at all, but something else. Something wearing his form. Something waiting. Watching. Looking for a way back. The woman who dreamed of him. Not long after, an old woman came forward. She had once been a friend of Osaze's mother, long before the riches and sacrifices. And she had seen him. Not in the woods. Not in the village. But in her dreams. He comes to me at night, she whispered. I see him standing in the doorway of my hut, his eye black as the river, his hands trembling as if he longs to hold something, or someone. She shivered. But he never speaks. Never moves. Just watches. The villagers shuddered at her words. Osaze had left the world of the living. But his soul had not yet crossed over. The last call of the spirits. One night, as the winds howled and the fire in the village square burned low, a lone traveler arrived. He was old, his back bent with age, but his eyes burned with knowledge. The villagers recognized him immediately. The oracle. He entered the village without a word, moving straight to the elders' hut, where the leaders of Koroma gathered. He had come with a message. The cursed one still lingers, he said. Not as man, not as spirit, but as something in between. The elders listened in silence. He cannot leave, the oracle continued. Because the final debt has not been paid. The fire crackled. What debt? One elder dared to ask. The oracle smiled, but there was no warmth in his expression. The death of love. The only way to free him. The villagers spoke of Osaze's story as one of greed, sacrifice, and betrayal. But the oracle spoke of something else. He spoke of a man who had given everything, yet had never been given anything in return. Osaze had sacrificed his time, his body, his future. And his wife had never once loved him for it. He was bound to her, the oracle murmured. Bound by the pain of betrayal. And until he is freed, he will never rest. A hush fell over the room. What must be done? The village chief finally asked. The oracle's gaze was dark and knowing. Someone must go to him. Someone must speak the words he has longed to hear. And only then will his soul be free. The one who spoke. No one dared to step forward. Who would face Osaze? Who would speak to the cursed man of the forest? Days passed. Then weeks. Then months. Until finally, someone came. She was not a warrior. She was not a healer. She was not even a woman of great wealth or standing. She was a girl. The daughter of one of Nia's old servants. She had been a child when Osaze had still been a man of flesh and blood. And she had once seen him kind, strong, and full of life. And so, one night, she entered the forest alone. The words that freed him. The girl found him where the others had seen him. Beneath the sacred tree, where the river bends. He stood motionless, his face hidden by the shadows of the branches. Her heart pounded, but she did not turn away. She took a step forward. Then another. Then another. Until she was standing before him. She took a breath. And then, she spoke. You deserve to be loved, Osaze. The figure stiffened. The girl continued, her voice shaking. No one ever thanked you. No one ever saw what you gave. But I do. The wind stilled. The trees grew silent. The presence before her shuddered, as if breaking apart. She lifted her head, and with the bravest words she had ever spoken, she whispered. You can rest now. And then. He was gone. The shadows that had clung to the trees vanished. The night air grew light once more. And for the first time in years, the village of Koroma felt peace. The end of a curse, the beginning of a lesson. Osaze's name became legend. Some called him a fool for ever seeking wealth. Others called him a victim of a woman who never truly loved him. But those who understood knew the truth. Osaze had paid the ultimate price. Not for gold. Not for riches. Not even for power. But for love. A love that had never been returned. A love that had never been spoken. Until the night a young girl freed his spirit with the only words he had ever longed to hear. And so, his story became a lesson. Not just of greed. Not just of the dangers of the spirits. But of the power of kindness. And the power of a single, honest word. The spirit's final whisper. The night after Osaze's spirit was freed, the village of Koroma lay in an unusual silence. For the first time in many years, the air felt lighter. The shadows that once clung to the sacred tree were gone. And yet, the people did not celebrate. Because they knew. The spirits were still watching. They had taken Osaze's soul and released it. But they had not spoken their final word. The return of the oracle. At dawn, the oracle arrived again. The villagers gathered around him, waiting for the final prophecy. He stood before them, his old, wrinkled face unreadable. The spirits, he said, his voice low and distant, are silent. A hush fell over the crowd. Silent, the village chief asked cautiously. What does that mean? The oracle's gaze swept across the people. They have taken what was theirs. Osaze gave his all. The debt is paid. Relief flooded the villagers. Some sighed. Others whispered prayers of thanks. But then, the oracle raised a hand. And the relief died. There is one final warning. The air grew still. The spirits do not forget, the oracle murmured. They do not forgive. And then, he said the words that made every heart in Koroma tremble. They will return when greed rises again. A village forever changed. Though Osaze was gone, his story remained. The village elders forbade anyone from seeking the oracle again. They warned against chasing wealth beyond one's means. They warned against greed, against lies, against pride that led to destruction. And most of all, they warned against forgetting. For one day, another fool might walk the same path as Osaze. Another desperate soul might seek the spirit's favor. And when that day came, the spirits would answer. Because the spirits always take their due. And greed always has a price. The final fate of Nia. Nia lived out the rest of her days in shame. Once, she had been the most admired woman in Koroma. Now, she was pitied. Her beauty faded. Her voice grew weak. And when she finally closed her eyes for the last time, the villagers whispered. She spent her life seeking gold, and died with nothing but dust. No one wept for her. No one spoke of her with warmth. She was simply another lesson. A name on the lips of storytellers. A woman who had wanted everything, and lost it all. The end of a legend. As the years passed, the sacred tree by the riverbend remained untouched. No one dared approach it after dark. No one spoke of making offerings. And those who ventured too close, swore they could hear something in the wind. A whisper. A voice. A warning. Do not make the same mistake. And so, Osaze's tale became legend. A story told in the flickering glow of firelight. A story of love, greed, sacrifice, and the terrible price of seeking what was never meant to be yours. And though many years passed, the spirits never truly left. They were simply waiting. Waiting for the next soul to come knocking. Waiting to take, once again,